Having discovered the wonders of comic books and all that it can bring, it's not without say that it can get a bit overwhelming with time. As costs for single issues goes up, collections spurs out from all directions, with a different format and shape to fit everyone's preference. How does one know when to say no, stop, I have enough? And how to get the most out of a hobby that just wants to give you more, but takes up most of your space, your free time, and a fair size of your paycheck if you're deep into the hobby. It helps to find a system to organize your collection, having a reliable reading system, and don't fall for every single sale that comes your eyes way. And splitting the bill can also be a preference. Hi, my name is Joachim, and this is what I've learned from 10 years of collecting comic books and collectible editions. Hey everyone, so we're doing this again. I am once again going to talk about how my discovery of minimalism and new perspective has helped me to maintain a steady balance when it comes to collecting graphic novels and comic books and such. And of course you can translate this to other media like maybe movie collecting, game collecting, and whatnot. It's really your personal preference in the end of the day, right? But I still would like to share my thoughts and ideas on how to maintain balance within your collection. So yeah, here's some few tips. What really got me started thinking about these tips is that what I always end up repeating is something is eventually gonna run out, whether it's your time, your space, your money, whatever runs out first, because maybe you have a steady paycheck, an infinite amount of money, and you can then buy as many things of the whatever thing that you like. And that maybe for my core audience that I started off with comic book collecting, that would be that you can buy as many comic books as you want, as many graphic novel collected editions as you want, and you'll eventually want to enjoy and read them all, hopefully. And then there is the issue of space. So if you have the infinite amount of money to afford all of these things, maybe you do not have the infinite amount of space that is needed to store said comics. And that would then lead to that if you are so lucky that to have all that space to store all those things that you can afford to buy, maybe you do not have the time to read and appreciate all of those things. Who is this video for? But yeah, one of these things should eventually run out. But I was thinking, maybe if you can afford all those books and all that space, maybe you're not that included. I'm talking to a CEO here, I think. Is that my core audience? The graphic novel collecting CEO chief? Maybe. But for your average Joe, one of these things, money, space, time, some of it would eventually run out unless you keep a steady balance amongst all of those areas. So here are some few tips for you. So tip number 1, simple as this: you can't just buy, you also need to sell. Speaking of experience, I've dwelled into many hobbies throughout my 30-year-old life. Comic books, for one, of course, and then we have movie collecting, TV series collecting, and of course, games. Not as many games as you would like to think. I'm dwelled heavily into Assassin's Creed at one point, and then all the other superhero games that would come out at the time. Turning back the clock maybe 1.5 years ago, I started an experiment of 30 days of gaming just to see how much time it would take me to finish up a game, how many games I could finish, and what else would I have time for if I gamed every day, at least 5 or 10 minutes. That was my goal, and I stuck to that goal. I don't think I missed a single day of gaming, but what I got out of that was that What I really want out of a gaming experience is the storytelling, and that is something that I would get out of reading a said comic book or see a movie. And I wasn't necessarily after the gaming experience itself. I also always took the difficulty level of easy whenever I was playing a game, because as I said, I wanted to get a story out of a game, not necessarily be playing out of it. And some of the parts really frustrated me playing the Batman Arkham Knight series. And yeah, so with that conclusion, I simply came up with that I do not really have the time to both play all of my games and make the best out of them at the same time as I enjoy a movie now and then and want to read my comic books and reread them. And as simply as that, I sold all my games and my PS4 console. So now that's one less distraction out of the way. That's one less thing to actually pick up when it comes to new games. And you can always watch a walkthrough video if that is your thing, if you want to get the story out of it. And the same thing went for a lot of my old movies and TV shows that I was collecting within Blu-ray format. And a lot of them you can find on streaming, and streaming really wasn't my thing in the beginning. I wanted to have the extra material and I wanted to be able to rewatch the series at any time. But then I started asking myself, will I really rewatch this within the next 5-10 years maybe? And they do take up a lot of space, so yeah, a lot of them had to go. And with that, it left me with some capital, and then we also have much more free time to add on the hobby that remains. That is the graphic novel collection. But it's not like I just hang back now and just let the books come into my collection, because then eventually the money and space would run out if I just keep on hoarding in books without trying to maintain a certain, I was going to say status, but what we're trying to have here is balance, right? So when I moved back here, I opted to restrain myself to 5 billy shelves with the extenders, so they go from floor to ceiling, and that is all the space that I want to give to my graphic novel collection at the moment where I live now. And it feels like a good number because it can fit approximately 400 books, I would say, depending on the size of the books. And right now I have somewhere around 350 books. So, simple as that, I just need to read my books, and I need to sell off some books whenever I want to give more space to new stuff. And so far so good, I would say. And that would simply lead me into my second tip of the day. And that would simply be, read your books and ask yourself, will I read this again? I made a self-parody video on this when I call it the Hell Yeah method, but that was just for fun basically. But I really want you to urge yourself to ask your question, will I read this again? And if it gives you any sort of value or a feeling whenever you read it, I think that is a good thing to hold on to a story and reread it in the future if you want to re-experience that feeling. Because if it's just meh, I think it's a selling pile that it goes. Tip number 3 is more of a personal struggle, I guess. That is to upgrade or not to upgrade. Lots and lots of times when there comes out a comic book, it seems to come out in a lot of different formats. We have trade paperbacks, we have standard hardcovers, deluxe size hardcovers, that is also oversized hardcovers depending on the company, library edition, omnibus edition, absolute edition. We have quite a smorgasbord to pick and choose from, as we would say in Sweden. Depending on your preferable format, sometimes you might want to upgrade. And for instance, when it comes to Al Ewing's and Joe Bennett's The Immortal Hulk, from Marvel is one that I was thinking about upgrading. And so it was solicited and published in 5 oversized hardcovers. And I read through them all. I read the first 2 volumes, and then I decided to hold back for the next 3 volumes that would conclude the series, because I really liked what I read. And then eventually, after I think 4 years of waiting, finally all of them had been published. And what do you know, they finally solicited an omnibus edition for the Immortal Hulk. And so of course I wanted to buy it, and that would leave me with having to sell off the books that I have been collected and waiting to be released for over 4 years. But I also have a preferred format, which is the omnibus format. And that is simply because whenever I read volume-wise, there's always the chance of an excuse to start reading something else in between volumes. Maybe you read the first or second volume, and then you have 3 more volumes left, but you know this other book that you really want to start, and so you start reading that one, and then you tell yourself that you'll get back to the Immortal Hulk after you've read that book. Then you never do. That is a very small risk, I would say, but still an opportunity of how your mind might work when reading the books. And of course, we all have different preferentials when it comes to reading as well. But that is one thing that I want to block myself from. Therefore, having an omnibus with a whole run in it would keep me to read this, the story from beginning to end. Beginning to end, that would be correct for the camera angle there. So I simply actually sold my Immortal Hulk to a fellow Swede this weekend as of recording this, and I am also opting to buy the omnibus edition when it's released this summer. And it's simply because of other things also. I would like to have my collection be as small as a number as it could be, and that would mean now downsizing 5 volumes to 1 as I sell off the hardcovers and then get the omnibus. And that is something that I've done with a lot of my books. So I get the preferred format, I get a smaller number in my collection, and a fellow Swede gets my books for a small discount. Everybody wins. Tip number 4. And this pill might be hard to swallow, but would you believe me if I said that I don't have a budget? Because it's true. I don't have a certain set of figures to spend on my comic book hobby each and every month. It's just simply because I don't buy comic books as frequently anymore. And that could be out of more reasons than just I don't need to read everything. It's not just that simple. It's simply because I've been collecting for a long time. I've been collecting comic books for over 10 years now. And if we look at Marvel, for example, because Marvel is one of the big 2, as you know, and DC, of course, with their solicitations, we get a lot of omnibus, which, as I said, preferred format and is what my eye is looking for. DC has slowed down immensely with their content on what they are publishing. Otherwise, I would jump on pretty much anything with Batman on it, probably, if it was modern age, that is. But when it comes to Marvel, a lot of their solicitations, they get a whole lot of new stuff, of course, but then a lot of stuff that would interest me are reprints of books that I already have, thankfully. Because maybe they've already been reprinted once, or that I simply got a hold of them in the early days of my collecting. And that has made me to have a lot of free months sequentially after each other that I don't simply want to buy anything of that they're offering. It's really good because it makes me feel that I'm in control, that they need to publish something that really intrigues me in order to get my said time and money, and for the space to be holed up in my bookshelves. Because I can imagine that it feels that sometimes it gets out of control, even though that you have a set budget, that things are going out really, really fast. And as they push the market with more books, they simply decide for you when to buy it. If you would have buying fatigue and FOMO and would buy it as soon as possible just to get a hold of said volumes. I simply can ignore that much better now because I'm satisfied with what I got, and they are reprinting a lot of good stuff right now. So if I were on the other end and didn't have certain books, I would probably buy into all of the reprints right now because there's some good stuff. And with me having sequential months of not buying each and every month, that adds up for some savings that I then can take whenever a big hell of a month. Suddenly there's like 5 omnibus that I want to pre-order at the same month. And that actually happened and recently, and lo and behold, I had saved up for 4 months for that one order. And that is why I don't have a budget strictly, but it makes me feel a lot freer when it comes to when I actually want to spend my money on the books. Tip number 5 for how I keep my balance within my collection. Also a tough pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of people. But my best tip is probably read more than you buy. But how? They are coming out with stuff all the time. And I want to buy all these things. But I don't have time to read because I have a family, I have a job, I have to go to school, I have to study, I have to prepare for a seminar, and I want to read all these fantastic books, but I don't have the time. So how the hell should I be able to read more than I buy? Quit your job? No. You need to maintain a certain balance within life as well as with the collection, I guess, to be able to have the time to read what you have. To pull back from a bigger perspective here, how I make it. Right now I work 50% on my day-to-day job, and the other time I'm trying to make my own company build up, and that is whatever amount of percent that I have time to give. In between it, I read some books, and the amount of books that comes in each and every month is approximately 0, because as I said, I pre-order books, I pre-order them in chunks, and they arrive here maybe once every 6 months, I would say, unless I buy some books from a Swedish company, but most often I buy from the US. You have to make a change in priority, I guess. Like I said, I quit gaming just to get more time and money back from one hobby into the other, to have more time to read, to have more money to buy. And let's roll back to pandemic times. In peak pandemic times, I was studying at home, and I maybe had the time to read 10 to 15 books per month. And then later on, going back to more normal days, maybe 10 books per month. So depending on the situation, because when you go back to work and everything, less time for less books. But as I said, I also started buying in less books each year, so it was easier to get back into rereading my books, because was a project that I never really said that I did that, but I took my whole collection of maybe over 900 books, maybe it wasn't even 1,000 at the time, but I started rereading it, and I started off with all of my Marvel books, Then I went on to the DC books, and then to my independent books, rereading all of the books that I had within each and every category. I then chose to sell off whatever books that didn't fit for future reread. So I minimized the books because I wanted to be able to look at my collection and want to reread all of them. And if you want to have the time to reread your books, you'll have to, as I said, read more than you buy, because if you buy 10 books each month and you only have the strength to read 10 books, you'll never get back into your old books. So why would you have a collection of old books if you never have the time to go back to them? That's the question that I told myself. And of course, if you don't have the barrier of, hey, you don't have to read all your new books, you can go back to your old books anytime and read those amongst the 10s that you have time for. Yeah, but then there would be a huge pile of unread new books that I never have time to get back to, because now I'm just reading all of my old stuff. So I'm faced with either one of two problems. Either I've had a huge pile of new books that is unread because I'm stuck in nostalgia of rereading my old books, or I read new books all the time, spending a lot of money on it and time, and my old books are never getting reread again, and it's just taking up space. It's a big question. It's a question that I think every collector has asked themselves at some time. And yeah, as I said, you're faced with either one of two problems. And I simply choose to not have a big unread pile of books that I don't have time for, and I get time to reread new stuff. And in my opinion, you haven't gotten any value out of a unread book. But a book that is read twice, you get your money's double worth. My god, that was a big ranting and a lot of talking. Okay, one last tip. Tip number 6. And this is where you're gonna turn off this video, because we are emotional beings, but we need to take out emotion from the equation in order to get control of our collecting behavior. Bye bye. And for you that has stayed, if you want to get something done or undone, you need to set up yourself with rules. Because I said that I don't have a budget earlier, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't have. And that budget is one of your rules, and you will follow it. It does not matter how much you want to buy it, your budget is out. You set these rules when you were in a state of control, and now suddenly you want something that you cannot afford, and you are now in a state of emotion of wanting. Whenever you find yourself in this position, you need to take a look at your paper notes or your digital notes or whatever you have written up these rules for yourself, not only in your head, because you'll forget. You need to write up these things at a certain place next to your computer or anything, wherever this things happened when you just buy. And you need to take a look at these notes with your rules that you wrote when you were in a state of control, because you're right now in a state of emotion, and you know that your state of control is smarter, or not smarter, it's more logical thinking than your emotional self. And you read them and weep, because you know that your rules are for you, because you wrote them when you were in control in your logical state. And with that, that's my final tip for this video. I am sorry for all of the talking, but I really want to invite you into how I'm thinking about all of these things and what has actually worked for me. And yeah, hopefully this helped you in some way, maybe one tip or two. Otherwise, you can give me some tips. I would like to hear them. And I thank you so much for watching this video. You can check out my Instagram account down below. You can also check out my Goodreads if you want to follow me on what I'm currently reading. And I thank you so much for watching this video. It's been fun making, and I hope to see you all in another video. Take care, and yeah, read your books more than you buy.